YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to be doing another OklaRoots pattern. This is a brand new pattern. It's a bag that I've been thinking about actually since the beginning of the school year when my daughter started middle school and she had a lot of things to carry versus elementary school. And so I've been kind of thinking about this bag for a while. Today, we're going to make the Mila monster. So the Mila monster is a very, very basic bag. It really is. I mean, with bag making 101, if you've been sewing for a while, you know this type of design is all over the place in all kinds of shapes and sizes. It is a front panel, a back panel, a bottom gusset, a zipper gusset, and then a strap, which is totally optional. Very basic shape. However, the size of this is really nice, the proportions are really nice, and it's just really fun to make. Now, I'm going to tell you right away, for those of you guys who I know are going to go, no, it's a bounded bag. Yes, it uses binding. And I know, I was in the same spot a couple years ago. I hated binding. Anytime I saw a bag that had binding, I was like, I'm not doing it. Nope, nope, nope. I'm a birthed bag girl through and through. But I'm hooked now. The more you do it, and especially when you find the right type of binding that just makes it so easy, it is easier to do than a birthed bag often. Also, it's just so much better. Like, it looks so much better. These types of seams and corners don't get better without the binding. Like I said before, it's like bones in a bag. It just gives it such good shape. You're not depending so much on the stabilizer to give the bag shape. You know what I mean? So this is the Mila monster. In the pattern, there are going to be two widths. So it's going to be the same size, top, sides. The depth, though, is going to be the difference. So this is the thin version. In the tutorial today, we're going to make the thick version. I have another one. I'll show you that in just a minute. You can use any type of material you like. This is using nylon material and then water-resistant canvas. You could definitely use quilt cotton. Just make sure you put interfacing on it. You could use vinyl, cork, anything like that. So the outside is nothing fancy. You can definitely add some of the zipper accent in here on the outside if you'd like. So speaking of that, on the inside we do have my favorite zipper pocket. This is a zipper accent zipper pocket. It is, in my opinion, the easiest way to do this type of in the material zipper. It's my favorite, and it looks so fancy, so professional. It looks like it was really hard, and it's not. It's so much easier than the other methods. And then on the other side, we have a mesh pocket. We're going to be doing a mesh pocket in the tutorial today as well, because I love mesh pockets. However, in the pattern, I do have suggestions if you want to make this a cloth pocket or even a clear vinyl pocket. I do suggest you use two zippers on the outside of the bag because it is a big opening, and it's just going to be easier when it comes to use. I'm putting a crossbody strap on this. However, if you want to keep it as a pouch, you definitely can. For reference, I'm 5 feet 4 inches, a size small or medium, and this is how it hangs on me. If you caught the April live stream, I had Mila wearing this bag, a different one that's hers, and I had my mom trying it on as well. So all three of us are different shapes and sizes and heights, and it looks good on all of us. It's such a cute bag. So as well as the bag, we're also going to be making fancy straps today. So if you've seen the fancy strap tutorial, you know what these are. If you haven't, then you're going to be welcomed into the fancy strap club today. These are really fun ways to make just a basic crossbody strap. Not required. You can definitely do it your own way if you want. I do love fancy straps. I do love being able to shorten this to more of like a shoulder size bag instead of a crossbody bag. It's so stinking cute. And if you want to super bling up your fancy strap, you know I have to recommend this. We have our strapsies in the shop. These are removable strapsies, so you can just easily put this on the webbing. So you see, you just wrap it around the webbing, straighten out your webbing. It is a tight fit, which means it might take a little bit of time to get it on, but once it's on, it does not slide around. So if you put this next to a strap slider, it's gonna ensure that your strap slider, like this one here, doesn't move back and forth. It'll stop it. So you wanna make sure you put it where you don't want it to go. So if it's like right here, you don't want it to keep going up, you would put your strapsie right here, and then they have little holes on them. Why do they have holes on them? Because we love to accessorize an accessory, of course. Why not just accessorize the bag, which is an accessory, when you can accessorize the accessory? And there you go. Look how stinking cute that is. So, your strapsies are nothing new here. They've been in the shop for a while, but if you're interested, I'll have a link down below for them. So like I said, there's going to be two depth options. They're not terribly different, but they do feel very different. So I'm going to keep it. I was hesitant on keeping both options in the pattern, but they feel very different. So this is the thin option, which is still, it's not a small bag. It's the thin option. And then this one is the thick option. And you might not even be able to see the difference, but I promise you can feel it, and you can definitely notice it when you wear it. This is the thin, this is the thick. So for this thick version here, I used a vinyl which is so soft, so fun. And on the front, I used a clear vinyl, and you can see I have some like little Mickey Mouse ears or Minnie Mouse ears in here. This is great for the parks. So I did a clear vinyl on the front of this one. Again, double zip. I'm gonna take out these ears. Clear vinyl with a jelly vinyl pocket. I made the jelly vinyl pocket just like I would a mesh pocket, except I didn't sew it down the middle. I just left it nice and open like this. This would also be great if you like pins. If you go to the parks and you want a pin bag, you can put your little pin sheet in here and show it off. Like I said, I love the ears. And then the fancy little zipper accent, which you can't see because it's too many prints. So if you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, leave them down in the comment section. I can't wait to see you guys make this bag. Again, I know it's a very basic bag. I mean, in all like honesty, it is a very basic bag. It is a basic bag structure. But it's basic for a good reason, because it's just perfect. It works out so perfectly, and it looks so good, and you can build on it so much. You want to put some details on the outside. You want to do some applique. You want to do the zipper accent over here on the back panel. You can have a lot of fun with this bag. It's a great starting point, but even if you don't add to it, it looks great in the end on its own. So like I said, this is an OklaRoots pattern, which means it is a full, very long pattern with pattern templates for everything. There are template sets, acrylic template sets available. I don't know if they're sold out at the time, but we will have the acrylic templates available. It is a set of 3. I'll show you it real quick. It's going to be the main front and back panel. I don't know if you guys can see, main front and back panel. It's going to be the slip pocket panel. And then it's going to be that zipper accent panel. So you'll get all 3 of those templates, and then you'll use the measurements or the templates from the pattern for the gusset and the zipper and stuff like that. A couple of handy little templates if you don't have the full set and you're going to be cutting this out using rectangles, because I do have measurements in the pattern for rectangles. So if you just want to cut it out without printing out the pattern pieces, and then circle the corners. The 1, 2, 3, 4 template is what we use for all those corners. And then if you're going to be doing stabilizer, the inner seam template is another one that will help. And these are 2 templates that you could use on all kinds of patterns, not just mine. All right, guys, that's enough. Let's get started. All right, so the fabric requirements for this are really going to depend on how you want to put it together. If you were going to just use one material for the exterior, you would want at least a half a yard. Honestly, I would go a full yard if there's a material you really like. And this exterior material can be whatever you want. It can be quill cotton. You just want to make sure you use woven interfacing. It can be vinyl. It can be clear vinyl. There's a lot you can do with this. As you can see, I'm going to mix it up a little bit today. The front and back panels are going to be this fun, I would say this is kind of a medium lightweight vinyl. And that's just going to be the front and the back. And then for the gussets and for some of the details, I'm going to use this faux suede pretty blue vinyl. Now this is more lightweight than this one, so that matters when it comes to stabilizer. I'll mention that in just a moment. For the lining, you are going to want at least a yard of material. Again, you can use quill cotton for this if you'd like, but you know I love using water resistant canvas for lining because I don't have to interface it. It's really easy to work with. I'm going to mix it up just a little bit. The main lining is going to be this fun moth print, and then for the zipper pocket I'm just going to use this light blue water resistant canvas. And then it's your material of choice for the slip pocket. I really love mesh, so you're going to want about a fat quarter of whatever material you want to use for that. Again, quill cotton, clear vinyl, regular vinyl, mesh, whatever you'd like. There's lots of options for the slip pocket. I like mesh, but if I'm doing a clear vinyl front panel, I do like to use like a jelly vinyl or a clear vinyl for that slip pocket. You can get you can get really creative with this. I'm just trying to give you kind of a foundation to build off of, and then you kind of go wild with it. All right, so when it comes to kind of the extra material, again, you really want to think about your materials. So I'm using vinyl today, which means I really don't need a whole lot of extra material. Now, if you want to add the foam and the Decoville light and really beef it up to make it an extremely sturdy bag, I say go for it. Those of you with an industrial machine, you know what you're doing. That is a great, great option. However, my machine cannot handle all those layers. And so, like I said, my main material for the front and back is a medium weight vinyl, and then my gusset material is more of a lightweight vinyl. And the gusset's actually what's going to be getting a lot of the pressure of things in the bag. So I do want to beef that up a little bit. So I'm using this sticky fusible fleece. So it's not fusible, it's got a sticky backing, but you can use Decoville light, Decoville heavy, foam, fusible fleece, whatever you'd like, any type of stabilizer at all. My suggestion again though is if you're using a domestic machine, you keep this material out of the seam allowance. There are pattern pieces in the printable PDF for the stabilizer cuts, and they are cut smaller so that they are not in the seams. So make sure you refer to that if you need to. Also, if you're going to be using any sort of quilt cotton in this, you're going to want about a yard of woven material, and these will go into the seams. So when you're using this for woven material, it covers the entire panel, not just within, you know, the viewable area in the end. It does go in the seams, but either way, a yard of both of these is going to be helpful depending on how much you want to use. Okay, here's some of the other options today. I'm using an adhesive, sticky backed, 1-inch wide nylon binding. You could use quilt cotton binding if you'd like. Any type of binding will be fine. The interior of the bag is coated with binding. This is not a birthed bag, it's a bound bag. I also use a little bit of this for that slip pocket. You're gonna want at least 3 yards of your binding of choice. There are 2 main zippers in this bag, and I do suggest you use zipper tape for this, not a metal zipper with a start and stop. We really wanna use number 5 zipper tape for this. Next, you're gonna want at least 2 yards of webbing. I'm gonna be doing a fancy strap today, so it's a different way of doing a strap. I'll show you how to do it in the video. We have lots of different options on sizes. I am using a 1.5-inch wide webbing here. However, you can use a 1-inch or 1.5-inch webbing, whichever one you're more comfortable with, or whichever one you have, honestly. Usually this just comes down to what we have available to us. So I'm going to be using a 1.5-inch wide webbing, but again, if you have 1 inch, that will work fine. I have 2 rivets for the bag that are going to go in the gusset, and then I have 4 rivets here that are going to go on the strap. All of the rivets are optional. The bag does actually not need these rivets on the gusset, but it is a nice decorative accent, and it adds a little bit of beef to it. And then for the straps, if you want, you can just sew down the ends. You don't have to rivet them down, but if you've been here for a minute, you know I really like to rivet down my strap ends. I have a sew-in bag tag that's going to go on that little fancy zipper pocket detail, and then I have my regular OklaRoots bag tag. When it comes to strap hardware, if you're not doing a strap, if you're just going to leave this as a pouch, then you don't need any of this, all right? But if you're doing a strap, your strap hardware is just going to match with the size of your webbing. I'm using 1.5-inch wide webbing. All of my hardware here is 1.5-inch wide. So 1.5-inch wide swivel hooks, D-rings, these are triangle rings, a rectangle ring, and a slider. And again, this is just for fancy straps. You don't have to make the fancy strap. You can make just a regular crossbody strap however you'd like. However, this is just what I like to do for this bag particularly. If you're using 1-inch wide webbing, you're still gonna have all of these pieces of hardware, except they're gonna be 1-inch wide, not 1.5-inch wide. Okay, so here's pretty much all the other stuff I'm gonna be using today. A good pair of scissors. We are gonna be doing some detailed cutting here, so make sure you have a nice sharp pair of scissors. For my top thread, the thread that goes through the needle, I'm using a Tex 45 weight thread. This is from Saya Swag. In the bobbin, I'm using a Gutermann polyester thread. My needle today is a Microtex 8012. If you're using some thicker material, or if you're using a thicker stabilizer, you will want to up it at some points to a 9014, so make sure you have both. As a bag maker, you should always have both of those needles, Microtex 8012 and Microtex 9014, specifically if you're using domestic machines. If you're using an industrial machine, you have different needles. You know what you need. I have 2 marking pens, one that works on vinyl, it's a silver ink pen, and then an air erasing marking pen. I have my seam ripper and also my stiletto, my 1-inch by 6-inch ruler, a lighter to clean up loose ends. I always have 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 inch wide, easy to sew over double-sided tape that's not too sticky. It's not made for leather. It's easy to sew over. It can wash out easily. I have a small pair of snips to clean up all those threads. And then because I am using rivets today, I have my rivet press and I have my hole punch. So let's talk quickly about templates and pattern pieces. In the pattern, you have printable pattern pieces. You have printable pattern pieces for pretty much every single piece of this bag today, including the stabilizer. There are a lot of pieces to print out, and pretty much most of them can be started as rectangles. So if you don't want to print out all that stuff, if you're more comfortable working with rulers, there is a cut list as well. So if you only want to use the cut list and then the very basic necessity printables, there'll be one sheet in the pattern just like this. And this sheet is going to have the zipper accent, the little fancy zipper accent we're using. It's going to have 2 rounded corner pieces, the main panel rounded corner piece, and this is going to be a 4-inch rounded corner. This is for the exterior material, and then you're also going to have your stabilizer one. So if you're using a stabilizer cut that's not in the seams for the front and back panels, you're going to also want the smaller one here. I have both the 1.5-inch and 1-inch rounded fancy straps here as well, as also with their little strap end pieces. So if you want to just cut everything out with your rulers and then round out what you need, and you don't want to print out a bunch of stuff, this sheet is going to be helpful, and then also just print out the cut list or just keep that open on your computer. If you're going to be using the cut list but you have some of these other templates already, then this is going to be really helpful. So if you have the 1, 2, 3, 4 rounded corner template, that's going to be really easy to cut out the rounded corners of your main panels and also the rounded corners on the stabilizer. If you need to mark the inside of the pattern pieces so that you make sure the stabilizer doesn't get in the seam. The inner seam tool is going to be really helpful. I know a lot of you guys have that. For this one, you're going to use the 3/8 inch marking on this because our seams today are all 3/8 inch. So just make sure you're using 3/8 inch pieces when you're tracing. If you have the rounded fancy strap templates, that's going to be great. This printable pattern here has the rounded fancy straps only for vinyl. So if you're using quilt cotton, you will want to go download the PDF that has all of the pattern pieces. So for example, it doesn't include this piece in the printable today because I'm just going to use vinyl for those strap ends. However, if you haven't seen the tutorial on the fancy straps and you want to use quilt cotton, you can. You just need this other pattern piece as well. If you have purchased the set from us, the acrylic set from us, you have all 3 of the pieces that you need. Also, there is the Mila Monster template set available. It is a set of 3 templates. It does not include templates for gussets or anything that's more of a rectangle. For those, you're going to use a ruler. But it does include templates for the main, exterior, front, and back, with notches for your fusible fleece or your stabilizer of choice, so you don't have to remeasure. You can just mark inside of this. It also includes the pattern piece for the interior slip pocket and the zipper accent. So your front and back main pattern pieces is going to be pattern piece A. You're going to have 2 cuts of exterior material and then 2 cuts of lining material. Remember, if any of this is quilt cotton, it needs to have the woven interfacing applied to the entire panel. If you want to use stabilizer, you can also cut down stabilizer and add it to this front and back main panel. Like I said, I'm going to skip it today. I'm going to make another bag probably on the industrial machine that's really beefy, so I'll film that when I do it, but I'm trying to keep it pretty simple today. So this is just what I have for the front and back main panels. Next, we have our bottom gusset, and I have, again, that lightweight faux leather for the exterior, and then I have this fun moth print for the lining, and then I have a cut that is just a bit smaller on all 4 edges using that sticky fusible fleece that I'm going to attach to the exterior main panel. So next I have my zipper gusset panels. You're going to have 2 cuts of exterior and 2 cuts of your lining for this. And then again, I'm going to be adding some of the stabilizers. So I have my smaller cuts of stabilizer and 2 cuts of those. For the interior zipper pocket, I have 1 cut of my accent vinyl. And this does need to be vinyl because it is raw edges. So no quilt cotton here. It has to be vinyl, cork, anything that can have raw edges. And then I have 2 cuts of my lining material for the zipper pocket. So for my slip pocket, I'm going to use mesh. I like mesh as a slip pocket. I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm a mom and I feel like I need to see everything in my bag at all times, but I do still want pockets. So I really like mesh pockets, but if you wanted, you could also use a clear vinyl. And mesh and clear vinyl will be treated the exact same way, or a jelly vinyl or something like that, by just adding binding to the tops of these, and that's pretty much it. Or you could build your own. This one was using 2 pieces of water-resistant canvas. In the pattern, I show you how to do this, where you put them right sides together, and then just sew along the top, flip them back, top stitch around. So you can do that as well. There's a lot of options for slip pockets here. So do whatever you feel comfortable with or whatever inspires you. Okay, so here's the strap stuff. So I have 2 pieces of webbing for my crossbody strap. Again, because I'm doing a fancy strap. If you want to just do a regular crossbody strap, do that. But for the fancy strap, I have my 2 pieces of webbing, and then I have my 2 cuts of my 1.5 inch wide fancy strap template. And then I have their strap ends that go with that. And then I also have a couple cuts of Decovil Light. Each of these is 1 inch by 3 inches, and it's just to help beef up those fancy straps. And then for my triangle rings or my D-rings, just the tabs that go on the side of the bag, I have 2 cuts of my webbing. It can be the same webbing that you're using. It can be a smaller, whatever you have. But each of these is 3 inches long. Okay, even though I'm not using any sort of stabilizer on my front and back main panels, I do want to show you how to make sure you apply it properly, just in case. And so I'm just going to kind of walk through this. If you have the acrylic templates, you can just lay this template over the back of your main panel and then just mark in a few of these slits. And this will just help with placement, just like that. It really doesn't take many of them. And so then when you have your smaller cut of whatever stabilizer you're using, you just line it up with these lines and then press it in place, and it's done. If you don't have the large template set, but you do have this inner seam tool set, you can also use this to help you. And you don't have to trace the entire inside for your stabilizer, just enough to help. So on this tool, there's a 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch, and 1/2 inch marks with holes to help you figure this out. So I'm going to be focusing on the 3/8 inch mark on the curved edge here. And all I do is I line up that edge of my acrylic on the curved side with the edge of my material, and then I'm just going to trace. And it doesn't have to look good, it doesn't have to be pretty, it's not going to be seen in the end. It's just enough for me to know where to put my stabilizer. So you can see I can just kind of trace around these curves, and I can just do all 4 of the curves really, and that would be enough, and then lay my stabilizer down. And now I know that my stabilizer is exactly where it needs to be, and it's not going to be sewn into the seams, making sewing the bag so much easier. So I'm going to attach my stabilizer to my gusset panels. I just use a ruler for these 3 corners here to mark 3/8 of an inch in everywhere, so I know that's where these corners need to go. If you have the interseam tool, you can also use the corner dot on this and just line up the corner of the tool with the corner of the material and mark a dot if you don't need all those lines, and then those dots are just where the corner of your stabilizer are going to go. So honestly, I'm still learning how to properly work with the sticky stabilizer. I personally love it. It's especially good for nylon material, but it is different than whenever you're using an iron. So I try to be nice and gentle and go all the way down, just a little bit at a time. All right, so once you have that on there, just push it down, and you can always lift it up and smooth it out if you need to. So I'm going to do this for both of my zipper gusset panels. So once you have your stabilizer applied to your zipper gusset panels, you can set them to the side, and you can see now it's much beefier, which is good. So this is actually going to be even beefier than my front and back panels, but I'm okay with that because the gusset is really what gets the most action in this bag. There's not a whole lot of pressure on the front and back panels. So I'm going to just repeat this with my bottom gusset. There we go. So now my gussets are stabilized. If you're doing the front and back panel with stabilizer, just repeat this for those panels as well. So one of the things you're going to want to do right off the bat is mark midpoints on all 4 edges of your front and back panels. And I like to do it on the lining and the exterior, because even though we have those rounded corners and it seems like it'll be easy to line it all up, you never know. So I'm just going to fold and use scissors to snip a teeny tiny triangle, and you will want to do this, like I said, on all 4 edges, the top, bottom, and right and left. So now if you want to add a bag tag to the front of your bag, find your main panel that's going to be the front of the bag, and I'm going to grab my bag tag and some double-sided tape, and I'm just going to add a little strip of double-sided tape to the back of the bag tag. And where you decide to place your bag tag is really just going to depend on your material and the look you're going for. I usually like to have it a little bit higher, but I have a pattern piece here that I like to show. So I actually place my bag tag centered and 6 inches down from the top. And now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and just top stitch around all 4 edges of my bag tag at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So when I sew on bag tags, I don't like to back stitch at the beginning and the end. I like a clean stitching. So what I do is I leave the tails really long. So the starting tail and the ending tails, so no automatic thread cutters here. You just leave the tails long. So you can see this is my top thread here, and on the back here's my bobbin thread. And then what I do is I pull up those bobbin thread pieces. I know this is hard to see, but I pull up the bobbin thread and just give it a little tug, and you'll notice a little loop of your top thread peeking out on the back. So you just use your stiletto for this and just pull that top thread to the back. And I'm going to grab the other bobbin thread and do that again, pulling the top thread to the back, just like that. So now I have all 4 pieces of thread on the back, and then I just split them into 2 and 2, and I do 3 tight knots, and then I just trim that down. Now, since this is the back of material and none of this is going to be seen, I can just leave it like that. However, if this was going to be like when we do the fancy straps, we'll do this. If this was going to be something where you would see the back of the material, you'd want to grab a lighter and just melt down the little pigtails of that knot so that it's nice and tight. So my front main panel is all prepped. I can set it to the side. So now we're gonna work on the slip pocket. And again, this you can do this however you'd like. This is my choice. So this is the mesh pocket, and I have a piece of binding that is just a little bit longer than the mesh pocket. Again, if you wanna use quilt cotton binding, you can. I'm not gonna show you how to double fold that. I'm just gonna show you how to do this the way I do it. So I'm going to flip over my binding, and I'm going to fold it in half, long sides together, wrong sides together, because my binding, like I said, is a nylon binding, and it has this paper backing on it, because it's sticky. Now you do have the option of buying the same nylon without the adhesive on the back, and you can still fold that and it will hold a fold pretty well. So either way you can fold this. So now I'm just gonna remove the paper from the back of this. So I have my binding sticky side up, and I'm gonna grab my mesh pocket, and I'm just gonna lay this down so the top straight edge lines up with that fold. There we go. And then I'll take the top end of the binding and wrap it around. And if you find that it doesn't quite reach, you can maneuver this however you need to. So sometimes it's good to have the top edge meet just underneath that fold. I forgot to mention clips as one of the necessary tools. But if you want to use clips, you can also use clips here if you're finding it's not sticking enough or you're not using sticky stuff. So now I'm just going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch along the top folded edge and also along this bottom little raw edge of my binding, each one at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that sewn on, if your binding overextends like mine does, just trim it down so it's the same size as your slip pocket. Now grab a lining main panel and lay it right side up, and then grab your slip pocket and lay it right side up, and we're going to line it up with the bottom corners. Now if you're using mesh like I am, this can be kind of stretchy and loosey-goosey, so it is possible to accidentally sew this on at a diagonal, which is cool, but maybe not the look you're going for. So in that case, the pattern does tell you how much you can measure up from the bottom edge and make little marks to make sure it lines up perfectly, or you can grab the acrylic template if you have that, or your paper template, and you know, the template will be not stretchy. So instead you can just line up the template with the bottom corners and then use the top of this to mark where the top of your pocket needs to line up on the sides, just like that. So then I like to use those marks and first lay my pocket on the edges just like that, and then I'll clip along the sides and the bottom and the corners. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm just going to baste along the sides and the bottom of my slip pocket, holding it to the lining at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now if you'd like to leave this as one large pocket, you can definitely do that. If you want to separate it into a bunch of skinnier pockets, you can do that. I'm just going to do a center pocket. So I use these 2 midpoint marks and a straight edge to just mark the center line with an air erasing marker. And now I'm going to go, starting at the very bottom, I'm going to top stitch up from the bottom to the top of my pocket, over and then back down to the bottom, and I'm going to use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, so 1/8 of an inch to the right and then 1/8 of an inch to the left of that center marked line. All right, your slip pocket panel's done. You can set this to the side. Okay, so let's work on the zipper pocket panel. This is my favorite way to do like a recessed zipper. I love this. It is so much easier than cutting out the rectangle out of your lining and then folding things back and then trying to keep it straight and then it gets small. This is just the easiest way to do it and it looks so good. So I highly encourage you, if you haven't tried this before, please give it a try. For those of you asking, yes, we will have these types of templates separate. We have some designs that we're working on right now for shapes and sizes and things like that. So yes, this fancy zipper pockets templates will be available in the near future. But to get started, a detail that I've seen a lot of bag makers make, this is definitely not my idea, but I think it looks so good, is that they add one of these woven labels underneath this little accent piece. You know, imagine that it's straight, and it gives such a cute, fun look to this, and I love that. So to help you with that, on both the printable template and on the acrylic templates, I did provide little marks of where I like to place that. So if it's right side up, it's going to be like this. So what we want to do, if you want to use those marks, is flip this over, and then I would also flip over my template, because remember, it's going to be mirrored in the end, and then just line this up with your piece. And again, this could be the paper template or the acrylic template. Raise it up just a bit and then use those lines to mark placement. Now the width of this is about 1 3/4 inch wide, so your tag might be smaller than that. It might be just 1 inch wide or 1.5 inches wide. So use these as guidelines. If you want it all the way lining up with the zipper, then just put it all the way to the mark that's right underneath the edge, the end of the zipper. If you want it centered, then center it, however you'd like to do it. But what I'm going to do to just make this easier is I'm going to grab a little bit of double-sided tape, and I'm going to put the double-sided tape right on the edge of my material. I'm going to line up my tag because my tag is about 1.5 inch wide. I'm going to line it up more with the leftmost mark here, so it's kind of like right underneath the end of my zipper. And then I'm just going to place this up here. And before you get into it, flip this over and make sure you can see everything. So make sure it's not hanging too low or too high. I think that works out just well because this is all raw edge. There's going to be no seams here. So I'm going to flip this back over. And once you have your tag, if you're using a tag where you want it, then what you're going to do is you're going to grab some double-sided tape and you're going to add double-sided tape right along the back of your fancy zipper. And I like to keep it centered. Don't have it too close to the inner cutout here because we'll need to lift it up at some point. So I like to just have it centered right along these long edges. So now make sure you have the midpoint marked on the top edge of your lining panel. And we also need to mark a midpoint on our fancy zipper here. So I'm just going to fold it in half. Now this needs to be a midpoint that's not going to stay forever. So use the right marking tool for this. Don't use scissors for this. And it just needs to be along the top edge of your zipper accent. So now I like to use a ruler, and I measure 2 inches down from the top edge here, and then match up the midpoint marks, again, using the help of your ruler. And I took the paper off the top piece of tape here, so that's taped down. So my bottom piece is still all loosey-goosey. So I'm gonna carefully remove the paper from that and then put this back down. Now, it is possible, depending on the material you're using, that this got a little wonky. That's where, again, either the paper or the acrylic template will come in handy, because you can just lay this over. And if you see that maybe like the bottom is a little wavy, just lift up the tape and straighten it out. So make sure it matches up with the template just like that. So now what we want to do is we want to take this to the sewing machine, and we want to sew along the outer edge, not this inner rectangle, only the outer edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I do like to leave the tails long and then pull them back and tie them off for this specific stitch. Tell you what, this tag, it doesn't lie. This is so stinking cute. It's so cute. Okay, so let me show you now. This is like my favorite part of this pocket. You're gonna want a seam ripper and scissors. And what we're gonna do is carefully, we're gonna seam rip inside this window right here of our lining, just like that. And then we're gonna grab our scissors and we're going to cut to get a nice big opening in here. And right now I'm looking at the right side. Now you gotta be careful with this, okay? Be careful. So we're gonna flip this over, looking at the wrong side. You're gonna lift up that lining so that you can see the back of the accent panel, and you're gonna just cut the lining so that it's not in that opening anymore. So you see how I'm lifting this up and just cutting. Be careful you don't cut this accent panel, okay? Because then you have to redo the whole thing, which is not gonna be fun. So I'm just carefully going around, lifting up my lining, again, making sure that I'm cutting the lining out of that window. This is again why I said don't have the tape too close to that little rectangle window, because you gotta be able to lift this up and cut it out. And it can look so sloppy. It is totally fine, which is so good for me because I'm not the best at perfect. So you see how I have that part done. Now I'm gonna do the bottom part here. And there we go. Like I said, this looks pretty messy on the back, but on the front, beautiful, absolutely perfect. My favorite type of zipper. Okay, set this to the side for just a moment. So now grab your small zipper and then your 2 zipper pockets, and if you haven't already, grab a lighter and melt down those ends because we do not want to deal with fraying right now. Take one of your zipper lining pockets and lay it right side up. Take your zipper, and when the zipper closes, it goes towards the left, and lay it right side up as well and line it up on the top long edge and clip these together. Again, both of them are right sides up. Now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew along this top clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end, and make sure you're using a zipper foot now. So if you're using quilt cotton or even water resistant canvas, you can use an iron for this part. What we wanna do though is we wanna fold the panel up, keeping the zipper flat. So you're not folding the zipper tape at all, you're just folding the panel so that the seam is now behind the zipper. You could, again, this material would be very easy to iron. However, I'm going to show you what I like to do because a lot of times I'm using material that is not easy to iron. So to keep this nice and flat, I'm going to go back to the sewing machine and I'm just going to stitch, a basting stitch is fine, right along the edge of my zipper where I sewed this down. So at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, just baste right there to keep this flat, to keep the seam flat. All right, so now when you're looking at this, if you had it with the pocket down, this is the wrong side of your material and this is the right side of your material. So when you have it right side up, you're looking at the back of the zipper. That's the point, right? Because the inside of the zipper should have the right. So now grab your other zipper pocket lining panel and lay it right side up, and then take your zipper and lay it right side up and line up the top edges and clip together. And now we're gonna sew along this top clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have it stitched in place, grab that lining panel that you just sewed down and flip it up and then flatten out the zipper. So the zipper stays flat and the seam is gonna go behind the zipper tape. And then once again, just baste along this raw edge of your zipper to keep it flat and keep it like this. Or you can grab an iron and just iron it down, whatever's easier. See, it's easy, right? So far, so good. I just feel like this is the easiest way, and it is the prettiest pocket. It's the easiest pocket. It's gonna look like you are just a bag making, you know, superstar, fancy designer. And really, it's just easier than any other way. So now I'm grabbing double-sided tape, and I'm gonna add the double-sided tape below that 1/4 inch mark. So it's closer to the raw edge. It's right on the raw edge of my zipper tape. I don't want this to be seen in the end, but I do need it. The tape is pretty necessary here. Now lay your pocket so that the zipper's right side up and you can see the tape, and the zipper when closing goes towards the left. Now grab your main panel with your fancy zipper accent. You're gonna lay this over and centered. So before you start sticking anything down, make sure that it is covering the sides and coming out evenly, okay? It should come out by about 1/2 inch on each side, but just make sure it is coming out on each side. So first what I do this in steps. I'm going to take the paper off this top piece of tape here, and I'm going to center this over my zipper. Here we go. And I'm making sure my zipper tape looks straight and that when I lift this up, I have overhang on both sides. That's very important. Okay, so now I'm just going to take my zipper pull and pull that through the window, and then I'm going to lift up the bottom edge of my main panel, and I'm going to take the paper off of this bottom edge of the tape, and then I'll just flip this back down and press it in place. And this is why it's important for the tape not to be super sticky, because we do have about 2 layers of tape right now. Also, you know, you need to be able to lift this up. If you're like, oh, that doesn't look good, flip it over. Make sure you can't see the open ends over here anywhere. It's all covered. There we go. But if you need to move this around, just pull it up, move it around, adjust. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to top stitch around this inner rectangle window at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. You can backstitch at the beginning end if you like, or you can tie off your tails, or you can do both. I usually do like to backstitch over the zipper coils as well, just because if you're being rough with your zipper, you don't want to rip those. Okay, so when you look at this right side up, this is how it should look. You have the zipper still peeking out the top, and then when you flip this over, it should look just like this. How stinking cute is this? Oh my gosh, I love it. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to rotate this, but we're going to fold down that top pocket down just like this. And then we're going to line up the edges. So you might want to use a clip here, but we're going to line up the side edges. And you'll notice that the other pocket, the bottom pocket here, it overextends quite a bit more than the top pocket. That's fine. What we want to do is we want to just gently grab some scissors and cut off the bottom zipper pocket so that it lines up with the top one. It doesn't have to be neat, it just has to line up. And then I'm going to grab some clips to clip along this bottom pocket as well. And now I'm going to flip this over. So my lining is right side up, and I'm going to lift up the side of my lining panel so I can see the sides of my zipper panel. And I'm going to stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the sides, the bottom, and the other side, making sure I backstitch at the beginning and the end and just completely closing up the zipper pocket. Okay, so now when you open this up, it should be a nice little pocket. How stinking cute is that? It's so cute, and it's so much easier than other pockets. Okay, so now grab your front main exterior panel and then also your lining panel with the slip pocket, and we're gonna lay these wrong sides together. Make sure the tops are the tops on both of them, okay? Do not install this upside down. That will be so sad. So top of the lining, top of the exterior, come wrong sides together. Use all those midpoints to help if you need it, and clip these wrong sides together. If you were using a foam stabilizer and you did not adhere it in any way, this is the time to insert it in. So now you would just kind of slide in your foam stabilizer, get it centered in there, however you need to. Use some tape if you need to, whatever, basting spray. Now's the time you can just slide it in there and add it. Like I said, I am planning on doing a much more structured bag where I use Decovil Light and foam, and I will build it on my industrial, and we'll see how that turns out. I think it would be amazing, but I have enough issues with my domestic machine. I don't need it getting any angrier at me. Okay, so once you have this all clipped, let's take this to the sewing machine and let's just baste around the entire edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Remember, these panels are wrong sides together. So you may have noticed I put some tape on my presser foot while I was sewing this. If you ever notice that while you're basting or sewing or doing anything, that your material seems to be being stretched and pushed, it's because that presser foot is sticking to your material, and it doesn't mean that the material is sticky. You never know why. Honestly, it's a mystery why it does it. But one of the easiest ways to fix that quickly is just to have some tape and just put some tape on the bottom of the presser foot so you don't have to deal with that. So your front panel is all ready to go. Let's set this to the side. Now grab your back exterior main panel and then your zipper pocket panel and lay them wrong sides together. Again, tops to tops. Line up using those midpoint marks and clip these wrong sides together. Now let's go to the sewing machine and let's baste along this entire outer edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Again, making sure that they are wrong sides together. Alrighty, your back panel is now done. You can set it to the side. So now we're gonna work on the zipper. So the zipper is pretty easy to do. We're gonna start with our exterior. So make sure you have both your exterior panels, both your lining panels, and your longer zipper. And lay your exterior panel right side up. Take your zipper and lay it right side down. The zipper should overhang on both sides. I do prefer them to be a little longer. If you want to center this, you can. So you can mark midpoints and center this, but it's not necessary. And we're going to clip these right sides together. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're just going to baste along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that basted on, grab one of your lining panels and lay your lining panel right side down on the back of the zipper. So it's right side to back side of zipper. Line this up with the corners of your exterior panels. Remember, my zipper overhangs, so we don't line it up with the corners of the zipper. We line it up with the corners of the exterior panel, and then just clip along this top edge. So we're working on the edge that you already basted. And now we're going to sew along this top edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have this sewn in place, let's flip the lining and the exterior wrong sides together. So if you're using quilt cotton or any sort of ironable material, you can use an iron to flatten out that seam right along the zipper. Otherwise, just use your fingers. And I like to grab clips here, and I'm going to clip along all the raw edges so that they're lined up and wrong sides together. Okay, so once you have this as flat as you can get it and all the edges are lined up, we're going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch right along the fold by the zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to go ahead and just baste around the 2 raw edges on the sides and the long raw edge to get this completely flat and all the panels lined up exactly. Okay, so there's one. We're going to repeat that with the other side. So grab the other exterior zipper panel and lay it right side up. And we're going to lay our zipper right side down and make sure you line up the edges of your zipper. So to make this easier, we can trim down the zipper. So if you want, grab some scissors and trim your zipper down so it's the same length as the top of that panel. Because now we have it where we want it. We should be good. But of course, after you cut it, grab your lighter and just melt down the raw edges of your zipper tape. So now it should be easier. Take your zipper gusset panel, lay right side up. Take your zipper, lay right side down, and just line up the zipper on the top edge. So once you have this clipped together, we can take it to the sewing machine and we're going to baste along that clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, now take your zipper and lay your zipper wrong side up, and then grab your zipper gusset lining panel and lay it right side down and clip it along that edge you just basted. Once you have these clipped together, we're going to go to the sewing machine and just sew along that clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have these sewn together, let's press the lining and the exterior back wrong sides together. And just like I did before, I'm going to line up all the raw edges of my exterior and my lining and clip them together. If ironing helps you here, go ahead and do it. Just be careful about having the iron touch any sort of vinyl or the nylon or anything like that. Make sure it's not touching material that wouldn't appreciate it. All right, now we're gonna go back to the sewing machine and I'm gonna top stitch right along the zipper, and then I'm also gonna baste stitch around the raw edges of this panel, all at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now your zipper gusset is almost done. What we wanna do now is to add our tabs. And if you're not making crossbody strap and you're just making this a pouch, you don't need any sort of D-rings or hardware or anything here. You just need your webbing. You could also use material for this, but I do suggest using a lightweight webbing because this does get pretty bulky over here. This is where you're gonna start thinking about upping your needle. I'm just gonna stick with webbing and I'm gonna use these triangle straps. So first I'm gonna do is I'm gonna thread my webbing around my hardware, and I'm going to clip along the raw edges, just like this. And then I'm gonna take both of these to the sewing machine. I'm gonna just baste along those raw edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to make sure this stays put and I don't have to worry about it moving around on me. Okay, so now we're gonna attach these to the zipper gusset. So looking at the right side over here, make sure the folded part of your webbing or your hardware is pointing in towards the center, and just center the raw edge with your zipper. And then I like to have the raw edge of my webbing overhang by 1/2 of an inch. So centered on the zipper and overhanging by 1/2 of an inch. And I'm gonna grab a couple clips to hold that in place. Just like that. I'm gonna flip this around. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. Once again, centered and overhanging by 1/2 inch. And now we're gonna go baste these webbing cuts onto the zipper gusset at 1/8 inch seam allowance, and you're doing it 1/8 inch in from the raw edge of the zipper gusset, not from the raw edge of your webbing. Okay, so while you were basting that on, if you felt like your needle was having a little bit of a struggle with those layers, now's the time to get a stronger needle. So I know mine was kind of weary about this, so I'm gonna switch it to a 90-14 moving forward. So now take your zipper gusset and lay it right side up, and then grab your bottom exterior gusset, and we're gonna lay this right side down. Now remember, we're making the thick version, so if you're looking at this and you're like, mine looks thinner, we're making the thick version of the pattern today. So lay these right sides together, and here's the thing. If you find that your zipper gusset is just a little bit wider than your bottom gusset, that's perfectly fine. So in the pattern we had this where the zipper gusset was just a tiny bit wider than the bottom gusset. Center them and then just shave down the zipper gusset where they meet, and you're fine. In this case, it seems like they're actually the same size. So it always just depends on your material and how your seam allowance was when you're sewing on your zipper. There's a lot of variables that go in here. Ideally, they would end up the exact same size, but if one is just a little bit wider than the other, just center them and narrow down the one that's wider just where they come together over here. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine. I'm going to baste along this short clipped edge here at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have that basted on, flip this over so you're looking at the lining side of your zipper gusset. And then grab your lining zipper gusset panel and lay it right side down so the linings are right sides together. And clip it along that same edge that you just basted the exterior to. And then I like to always flip this open and make sure my D-ring or my hardware is poked in, it's not folded over anywhere. And now I'm going to go sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end, and just be careful if you've got some bulk here, okay? You got to go over a lot of layers. All right, because my machine was struggling a little bit over the webbing fold over here, I did do a second row of stitching just over the webbing to really reinforce it. You always want to make sure you do the little bit of extra work now so your bag doesn't fall apart later, because it can be virtually impossible to fix it if that happens. So now we're going to work on the other side. So with your gusset right side up, and we're looking at the raw edge on the left here, we're going to take our zipper gusset and pull it over to meet with the short edge of the bottom gusset, and use clips to clip these together. Once again, if one is wider than the other, just trim it down where you need to get them the same width. You don't have to trim the whole zipper gusset or bottom gusset down, only at those corners so they line up. That's it. And now keeping the lining panel out of the way, so I flip this over. Lining panel is still out of the way. I'm going to baste along this clipped edge at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Once that's basted, flip this over so you're looking at the right side of the lining, and then take the bottom edge of your lining gusset and lay your lining gusset with the zipper gusset right sides together, matching up those short edges, and clip together. And now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Go slow over the bulk of that webbing. And if you need to do a second row of stitches just over the webbing, go ahead and do that. Okay, so now we're gonna flip our bottom gussets so they are wrong sides together. So just flip this around, just like that. And if you haven't had any issues with bulk yet, you might now. So let's be careful here. So what we want to do is we want to focus on these seams here. So pull the material taut away from the zipper gusset. So you're pulling the bottom gusset away from the zipper gusset. We did not trim down our overhang of webbing. We still have an overhang of webbing there. We didn't trim anything down over there. So I'm just pulling it taut and getting it nice and flat here and clipping the sides to hold it in place. I'm gonna do this on the other seam as well. I mean, you guys, this looks cool. That webbing is cool. The webbing is a little dense. It's not thick webbing, but it's pretty dense, which is why my machine's having a little bit of a hard time sewing over layers of it, especially combined with the layers of the faux leather. But it looks so good. Okay, so now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch on the bottom gusset at 1/8 inch seam allowance below that seam. Be careful when you go over the webbing part here. I find that I do have to, again, increase your needle size to a thicker needle, and I increase the tension on my top needle. So I make it more tense on my top needle to help prevent looping on the lining side. All right, look how good that looks. Actually, I didn't have any problems. So I'm gonna quickly add a rivet here. Rivet's totally optional. It's just cute. It also helps with the webbing, but it is optional. So I'm just gonna add 1 rivet. If you prefer to use 2, especially if you're using a 1.5 inch wide strap, you can go ahead and do that, but I'm just gonna use 1 rivet. And what I did was center it on my webbing and then measure 1/4 inch down from the fold of the seam. So that's the placement for the rivet. Since I'm using the thick gusset for this one, I do need to get my other hole punch out because my hand one didn't work. So I'm just gonna punch out the hole where I marked it. So once I have that, and I'm punching through all the layers, lining included. And I'm just going to insert my rivet into there, flip it over, snap it into place on the back. And then I have my rivet press. And I'm just gonna press this in place. And you see, that's what it looks like on the exterior. The rivet's also on the inside, which I think looks really cool. So I'm gonna repeat that with the other side as well. Okay, once you have rivets installed and all that, now we need to baste the sides of the gusset. So whenever I do this, if you kind of kept it like this and you try to clip all this together, you're gonna be like, my lining is bigger than my exterior. Your lining's not bigger than your exterior, it's just curved. So whenever you clip these, make sure you kind of stretch it out and almost like bend it in the opposite direction of the lining. And that will help make sure that when you clip this together, you don't end up with what feels like extra material. So just always straighten it out first and then clip the lining and the exterior wrong sides together. So clip both sides of your bottom gusset. And now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're just going to baste right along both long clipped edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Ooh, I tell you what, there's not a huge difference number-wise between the thick and the thin gusset, but it feels a lot different. Like the thicker one just feels substantially bigger. It's not a huge difference, but it is a difference. So before we move on, we want to start marking some midpoints. So we're going to mark the midpoint on the top and the bottom. So I'm going to use clips to help this. Take both of the seams between the zipper gusset and the bottom gusset and line them up so they match up completely. And then we're just going to fold along this top edge here and then find the midpoint on the top. And then I'm going to just follow along the bottom gusset and clip there where the midpoint is. I'm going to flip this over again, matching up those seams and then pulling along the top edge here and then clipping the corner on the zipper gusset and also on the bottom gusset. Okay, so now we want to find the midpoint on the sides here, and where this seam is, that is not the midpoint. That is above the midpoint. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to open this up and we're going to line up the top and bottom gusset midpoints, clip those together, and then we're going to follow along by folding it in half, and then we'll clip the midpoint. So you'll see the midpoint is just below where that seam is. So do this on both sides and then flip this over and do the same thing on the other edge of your gusset. All right, your gusset is all ready to go. So now grab your exterior main panel and lay it right side up, and then grab your gusset, flip your gusset so it's lining side out. You're gonna find that midpoint on the zipper panel part of the gusset, and you're gonna lay it right exterior sides together with the front main panel, lining up those midpoints, and clip at that top middle first, and then taking the midpoint on the bottom part of your gusset, line that up with the midpoint on the bottom part of your front main panel, and clip there as well. So line those up, exteriors right sides together. And then we're going to do the same thing on the sides, lining up the side midpoint with the gusset side midpoint and clipping there. Do this for both sides. And then once I have the midpoints clipped, I like to flip this over so I'm looking at the lining side of the main panel, and then I'm going to clip along all the straight edges. So do all the straight sections first and save those rounded corners for last because we need to discuss those. Okay, so once we get to the rounded corners, you want to kind of sink in the main panel like a bowl and keep the gusset straight like a wall and just tuck it in there. And if you find that the main panel is kind of rippling up on itself a lot, you can grab your scissors and add a couple little snips, just about 1/8 of an inch in, maybe 2 or 3, right on these corners, And that's gonna help the gusset spread out. So you see, can you see how it spreads out more so that it can easily wrap around these corners? Now, how much you have to do this really depends on your material. If you're using thick material with a lot of stabilizer, you might really have to cut in quite a few of those little nicks to get that gusset to spread. However, if you're using lightweight material, like when I was using the bonded nylon, I really didn't have to cut into it at all. There was no need to cut into these corners. But like for right now, I do require about 2 or 3 just little cuts right on those corners so that the gusset can spread around the rounded corner of the main panel. But don't do more than necessary. Don't you know, get too excited about this and just start making a whole bunch, because then your gusset will spread out too much, and then you'll find that your gusset starts to kind of ripple when you're trying to sew it on. All right, once you have this all clipped on and it looks good, you're gonna flip this down and you're gonna sew this on with the gusset lining side up and sew around the entire clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I like to use a zipper foot for here. I feel like the zipper foot really helps with these corners. Just go slow. If you do have any like little spots here where you can see it usually on the gusset side, you'll see it pleated, like folded on itself, just seam rip around it and then stitch over that area again. Just back stitch at the beginning and the end and go and extend over the area. That's all you have to do. It's pretty simple. But now grab one of your longer binding pieces. And since, you know, again, I'm working with this adhesive nylon binding, I'm just gonna fold it in half, long sides together, wrong sides together. And then all we're gonna do is just wrap this around the seam. So I'm not very precise when it comes to this stuff. I'm just going to lift this up. And since I have that fold, I know I just need to have the fold go right around the raw edge. And I just wrap it around like that. I mean, it's pretty basic. So I'm just gonna go around. The straight edges are easy. For the curved edges, I just kind of get it on there and then I come back to it later to make sure that I don't have any bubbling or pleating or anything like that. Like right now it's kind of a mess, but I'm gonna come back to it and fix it. For now, I'm just trying to wrap it around the seam and make sure that it overhangs the same amount on both sides. And if you find you need to use clips to help hold it in place, just go ahead and add them. All right, once you get back to the beginning, you can trim it down so it's not overhanging so far, but you can also just wrap it around where you started. I don't fold anything down or anything like that. So I've got it attached for the most part. Now I'm gonna go back to my curved edges here and I'm just gonna kind of unstick it and flatten it and work it out so it looks just the way I want it to look on both sides. You'll find the gusset side isn't the problem. It's the inside where you see it kind of pinching on itself. And that's okay if it has to pinch on itself a bit, but you don't have to have it super noticeable. So just unstick it, fold it, restick it. Just make sure you're giving it all a good once over, checking both sides to make sure the stitching is covered on both sides. All right, once you have this attached, we're gonna take this back to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch this on. I like to have the gusset lining side up while I do this. And I'm gonna top stitch it on at about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You'll find some areas where the material is very thin and you can probably just top stitch at a 3/8 inch. And other areas where the material gets very bulky and you might be doing less than a 1/4 inch. So just pay attention to that. It's okay if your top stitching seam allowance has to change a little bit as you go around. The goal is just that when you're top stitching, you're catching both sides of the binding. So go slow, take your time, and back stitch at the beginning and the end. Alrighty, take a look. It's looking so good, isn't it? All right, so that's one side. Now we just have to do the back. And I will be honest, attaching the back is a little bit more difficult. First thing you wanna do is open up that zipper. It doesn't have to be all the way, just open it most of the way. Grab your back panel, lay your back panel right side up with the top on the top. And then grab your gusset, and with the zipper gusset, line up the midpoint mark with the top of the back panel and clip together. And this one's just gonna be easier if I do it all like this. So then I'm gonna pull down in here, pull the bottom of the back panel, line that up with the midpoint on the bottom of the bottom gusset and clip together. And then do the same thing on the sides, clipping the sides at their midpoints. And I'm gonna go around and do the straight edges as well. And this time with the corners, I'm not gonna cut into the gusset like I did last time because I think I did too much of that. And instead what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna keep scissors next to the sewing machine, and if I find that I'm sewing around these curves and that gusset is just not coming to meet the raw edge of my back panel, and I'm really struggling, then I'll just make like one small clip wherever it's necessary. Because I think I overcut into it on the front panel. Okay, now this part's a little bit harder because you've got a lot going on here that's trying to fight with your machine. So sadly, what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to smush this cutie down. I know you don't wanna do it. It looks so pretty. You're gonna have to smush it anyways when you turn it right side out. So just do it now. Smush it down, get it out of the way so it's not hitting anything. And we're going to sew with the gusset lining side up and sew around the entire clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Go slow, use your stiletto. Again, if you get to a corner and the gusset's just pulling too much, do a small snip with your scissors into the gusset panel so it can spread, but not too much, and backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so that time I did not use my scissors to cut into the gusset at all, and I think it actually worked a lot better. So again, it's one of those things where you really just depends on what your material is. If you're using a really thick material, you might have to cut into the gusset to get it to spread. If you're using more lightweight material, you might not. So, okay, but that is, in my opinion, the hardest part is that second sew on of the gusset. Now we're gonna attach the binding, and I find the binding to be much easier to do. So just like I did before, I'm gonna fold this in half, long sides together, wrong sides together. And then I'm just gonna remove that paper so that my binding is nice and sticky. And once again, I'm just gonna go around wrapping this around the edge, doing my best to make sure it overhangs the same amount on each side. So just like I did on the front panel. I can just not get over all these colors. They're looking so good. All right, so once you have the binding clipped in place, we're gonna take it to the sewing machine, and once again, we're gonna top stitch around the entire bag with the gusset side up. I like to do it about a 3/8 inch to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Some areas you can do a 3/8 inch, some areas you might have to do less than a 1/4 of an inch. Just go slow and top stitch all the way around and back stitch at the beginning and the end. Alrighty, the bag portion is done. Let's flip this out and take a look. Honestly, I just love how this lining looks right here. I'm gonna take a little screenshot of that. That looks so good. All right, so now with the zipper open, gently flip this right side out. If you're using clear vinyl or anything like that, or some sort of like very thick vinyl and you're worried about it creasing or anything, just grab a hairdryer, blast this with a hairdryer while you slowly turn it right side out. But the opening is big, so you shouldn't have too much trouble with anything getting creased. So as you flip this right side out, just get your fingers in there and roll out those corners. And then you can just kind of give it a finger press. And it's gonna be a little messy in the beginning. You just need to give it some time to settle. So I always like to just roll out these seams and press them with my fingers real well so that the bag knows what I want it to do. And then just let it sit. Oh my gosh, how cute is this? And I love how thick it is. I really do. I love the thick version of this. I know it's a bigger bag with this thicker gusset. Let me show you compared to the thinner one. So here's the thin one, and I know they look similar. I know that. Like on camera, it's like, it doesn't look like it's that much thicker, but it feels very different when you wear them, and I love them both so much. Like I love them both equally, but I would wear them for different purposes. Okay, so the bag portion is done. Now let's make our fancy strap. All right, so now we're gonna make the fancy strap. I have a whole tutorial going over how to make the fancy strap with vinyl and also with quill cotton and how to use the pattern pieces and stuff like that. It's very in-depth. So I'm just gonna kind of roughly go through this with you today, but if you want to see a lot of details on how to make this strap, I'll have it linked down below. Okay, so I have all my things. I have my long strap, my short strap, my 2 fancy strap ends, my 2 rectangle strap ends, swivel hooks, slider, rectangle ring, my rivets, and I'm also using the template to help me with placement for rivets. You can either attach the fancy strap swivel parts on first, or you can attach the long straps to the slider and rectangle ring first. They're both pretty simple to do. In the pattern, I did the swivels onto the straps first, so I'm gonna do the other way for the video. First things first, if you have a preference on which ends are going to be getting the fancy strap with the hook, think about that now. I don't have a preference. So I'm gonna start by adding my rectangle strap ends to each of the other ends. So you can take your template and draw a midpoint line on the back of each of these. I have a little dashed engraving line on it, or you can just fold it and find the midpoint. That's also very simple to do. I'm gonna grab a little bit of double-sided tape to help with this. just because I need it to stay in place while I'm working with it. So I'm just going to grab some double-sided tape and I'm going to add a small piece on each side of my line, just like that. And I'm going to remove the paper from both sides. I'm going to grab my strap and I'm going to line it up so it just meets that midpoint line. And I'm going to wrap it around and fold it over and make sure that it is overhanging the same amount on both sides. So there's one. I'm going to repeat that same process with my longer strap and my other rectangle strap end. All right, so one thing to remember is that the longer strap gets the adjuster. The shorter strap gets a swivel hook and also the rectangle ring. So let's attach this to the rectangle ring. Grab your rectangle ring and thread the end that has the rectangle strap over and around one of the bars. And now if you'd like to go to the sewing machine and just top stitch this in place, you can. I prefer to rivet in place. So I have my tool here and I'm just going to line it up so it's covering the end of my strap. And I'm just going to use the holes that are in it to mark placement for my rivets. And I'm just going to grab a couple clips to hold that in place. And now making sure it's straight in the way I want it, I'm going to grab my hole punch and I'm going to punch through both sides of that rectangle overhang and both folded parts of the webbing. So I'm punching through quite a few layers here. So as I punch one hole, I'm going to immediately put a rivet in there so it stays in place because it does like to kind of wobble around. Then I'll go to the other side over here, find the other mark and punch a hole there and then push a rivet through that as well. Okay, so the short one is in place. I'm going to wait until the end to press down all the rivets just in case I make a mistake. So now I'm going to grab the long strap and the side here that has the rectangle overhanging it, that is going to go up through the bottom of your adjuster, over the middle bar, and back over the other side. And have it come over just enough. So if you're going to be sewing this down, you might want to pull this down by an inch or more so that you can top stitch around this. If you're going to rivet it down, you can just pull it down like 3/4 of an inch. There we go. Once again, I'm going to use my tool here to mark placement for my rivets. And then I'm going to punch the holes out with my hole punch. And again, right after I punch the hole, I immediately snap in the rivets. Because the nice thing about the rivets is that they just snap together and they'll stay there. And if I have to take them apart and move them, I can. It's not a big deal. So now take your short strap and lay it so the fold over is down. So this is kind of considered the right side. So fold over bit is down. Grab your long strap with the fold over up. So we're looking at it just like that. And we're going to take the raw edge of our webbing and we're going to thread it underneath and over the other side of that rectangle bar. And then it's going to come up to meet the fold over edge we have here. It's going to go from the bottom of the adjuster up and over that middle bar, down out the other side. So it should look just like this. And then when we flip it over, both of the fold over edges are down here. So once you have that in place, now you can set all your rivets by just easily pressing them in place. Okay, so now we can attach the fun part. And so I'm just using the blue cork, but these are really fun if you have like a vinyl that has small prints on it. This is fun, or quilt cotton if you have small prints. So to attach these, we're just going to add them to the ends of our straps. So first thing you want to do is grab your swivel hook and thread it on so that the bar part is on the back, and then fold your material wrong sides together just like that. And you can see on the back of my material, I adhered a little 1 inch by 3 inch cut of Decoville just to make sure that as this gets pulled on, it doesn't rip or anything. Now I like to use glue to help with this step. So I'm just going to put some glue on both sides on the back of my material here. Not a ton, just enough to keep it in place. And not close to the edge either, so I don't have to worry about sewing over it. And now, again, knowing where it's folded over, I'm just going to kind of nom it over the end of my strap. And I have the webbing come almost all the way to the bar. So get it really close to the bar. If it gets all the way to the bar, you might see it on the sides peeking out. So if you don't want that look, that's why I say almost all the way to the bar. Once you have it wrapped around, make sure it's matched up on all the sides. And then just use some clips to clip this together. And now we're going to go to the other end of our strap and we're just going to do the exact same thing. Add the swivel hook, add some glue, and then insert the webbing so that it comes close to that bar. And then wrap this around the end of the webbing. Use your clips to clip it together. Make sure all the edges are matched up and that it's coming up the same on the top here. You don't want one side to be longer than the other. All right, and then once your glue is dry, you can take this to the sewing machine, and we're gonna top stitch along the top of this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we're gonna go just below the bar here. Make sure you don't hit it. A zipper foot's gonna be helpful with this. So just below the bar and then around the raw edges, all at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Back stitch at the beginning and the end, and then pull those tails to the back side, tie them off, and burn them off. Okay, here we go. Our strap is sewn on. And we're just gonna clip it onto our bag, which looks so good. Doesn't that look great? Oh my word. And then let's just open it up, take a little peek inside, and it's like, ba-bam! Look how much fun I am on the inside. I love this, guys. I hope you love it. I really do. And if you guys have any questions or any tips or anything like that, leave them down below. But I hope you guys love making the Mila monster. Oh, she turned out so pretty. Oh my gosh, I love this one so much. If you guys know, Haunted Mansion is like my favorite vibe. I wouldn't say ride, it's my favorite vibe. I love the Haunted Mansion. Madame Leota. So this turned out so stinking cute. Look at that inside. That lining just kills me. That lining with this binding, it kills me. Absolutely love it. So, so pretty. And it was, in my opinion, it's pretty easy to make. I don't know. I have a lot of experience. I make a lot of bags, but in my opinion, this is a pretty easy bag to make. You'll notice that I keep pinching the seams because it still hasn't turned out all the way. And so if you notice that like your seams are rolling in, all you have to do is give it a good pinch for a little bit and let it just hang out. I like to like hang it on something, on like a closet door or a clothes hanger or something like that, and then it'll roll out on its own. But oh my goodness, this looks so good. I love these bags so much. So I hope you love making these. I hope that all of the templates in the pattern are really helpful. I hope all the photos in the pattern are really helpful because I know there are a lot. I'm having a lot of fun writing these patterns, and you guys know I'm not a pattern writer, so normally when I have an idea, I just give out templates and then I do a video and that's it. But we've had a lot of requests lately for full patterns that you can just keep on your iPad, or if you don't have internet access, you know, you can still have access to the instructions. So we are going through all of the patterns to write proper patterns. So Anna, Bobby Boxy, Classic Boxy, all of them. Every one of the OklaRoots templates and video combos, we are writing patterns for those as well to make it easier for you guys, because I know you guys find this really useful. But I was really excited about the Mila monster, so I had to kind of slip this one to the front of the line. So I hope you love making this bag as much as I do. If you make it, please make sure you tag me on any social media platform. I'm OklaRoots everywhere. I want to see your version. I'm so excited. If you have any questions at all, leave them down in the comments, or you can always email me. I'm jessica@oklaroots.com. I'm here to help, so let me know your thoughts. Let me know how it goes. I hope you're having a great day. Have a great rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.